What's up, Coordination? On the pod today, we've got David Greenstein, the co-founder and CEO of Sound.xyz. Sound is a platform to help recording artists monetize their community through NFTs and is designed to help musicians leverage Web3 tools. So I wanted to have David on the pod to talk about how Sound is helping artists, both in how they can get their music heard and how they can monetize their work. I think that there's a huge opportunity here to create a more regenerative crypto ecosystem by regenerating the regenerators. So music and art has been an inspiration for me in my life and the work that I do. I can't produce any music or I'm not that talented of an artist myself, but I consume a lot of music, and especially while I'm coding, I love to listen to music. And for me, art is such a source of inspiration. One of the ideas that I think is really interesting is how do we build coordination mechanisms in Web3, decentralized coordination mechanisms that fund the people who are doing the best art and the best art for me, and what are the ways that we can alter music discovery and the way music is funded, and remove the intermediaries that have traditionally stood between artists and their fans. So building coordination mechanisms and platforms that help people find the music that they love, and helps musicians pay the bills so that they can continue to create great art. And so David is an inspiration. I mean, he is building a platform, Sound.xyz, that helps you discover music that you care about and helps artists get funded. And again, this is to disintermediate A, record labels, but B, in the technology age, most music is discovered on TikTok or YouTube or MySpace and other platforms of that nature. So how do we disintermediate the way musicians relate with their fans and how they discover each other is the subject matter of this episode. So if you're into funding the arts and more pro-social Web3 communities that are centered around artists, then I think you're going to enjoy this episode.
ValleyDAO is an open global collective working to finance and democratize the governance of synthetic biology technologies to protect the future of our planet. Research and progress into synthetic biology is critically constrained by the world of nation-state regulations and bureaucracy from middlemen. But the potential that synthetic biology has for the world is massive. It can produce a world in total harmony with nature. We can grow stuff using cells like software. It's awesome. And the best part is we no longer have to pull carbon out of the ground to grow and maintain civilization. Don't you think we should be funding this? ValleyDAO does, and that's what they're here to do, to try and make the SolarPunk world of tomorrow a reality today. So join ValleyDAO right now and save the planet at valleydao.bio.
What's up, David? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Coming off a long weekend, so excited for this.
Yeah, samesies. Well, I'm wondering if you could take us deep on Sound.xyz. What is it and why did you found it?
So Sound is a set of Web3 tools that help artists monetize and experiment with their music in new ways. We started with this idea of artists, the first thing they want to do is put out their song. And so we built an experience around releasing music and making it fun and social to support an artist through their music and basically get the credit for basically being there first, which was something that I was always on the internet as a kid, just browsing, music on YouTube or SoundCloud, and always trying to brag to my friends that I found something first, and played a little bit of the origin of, I believe in building things that you want to see in the world and use. Music I've talked about this a lot before, but music has been my passion ever since I was a kid. And I honestly got a bit of luck. I grew up in New York and started working at a record label when I was a child. Because I always say that the CEO of Atlantic, Craig Kalman, came to speak at my high school when I was a kid because he went there as an alumnus. And so I got my exposure just working with in the music industry at a super young age. And I was always just fascinated by the business model of music. Like, in order to understand music, you have to understand the business of music. And so I always thought there was this dichotomy around, artists, some of the most creative people in the world. But they're all sometimes trapped in like a business model that is very far from creative in terms of you would hear things like you can't put out music unless you got certain other people's permissions. And that just led me down this journey of how do you create things that help artists, make a more sustainable living off their music. And how do you help them connect with their fans directly? And, I've been going to concerts since I was, again, just growing up around music. And yeah, it's just been something that's always inspired me. And I think one of the things about music that I think particularly caters to me is I always say the attention span I can't keep focused for too long. And so something beautiful about music is that it takes 3 minutes often to change your mood, to change your life. It's much different than other forms of media. And so I think it's the perfect media form for me. And so I've always just gravitated to music because of how quickly and how meaningful one song at any point, any time can be to just influencing people's day, and how anyone can kind of engage with music, whether you're at work, whether you're, running, whether you're browsing the internet. It's just something that's with you at all times. And that's something that's always just inspired me since I was a kid.
Yeah, same. I mean, I've just always found music to be a way to change my mood, a way to focus, and just a source of inspiration and beauty in my own life. And I think that I've been drawn to music for that reason, but it sounds like you went even deeper, even to understand the music industry, and you observed that the institutions that allow musicians to go from not being known at all to being stars, there's sort of like an opportunity there to reinvent how that happens and to remove the intermediaries to help musicians build their first fans. Can you tell me a little bit about what those problems are and how Sound solves them?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple problems in the music industry. One is obviously, how do you help artists reach people with their music? And I always call that music discovery. And two is, how do you help artists make money on their music? And obviously that's music monetization. I think with music discovery, I always say that the tools to create music have never been better. Like, there's more songs than ever being uploaded before. But the tools to discover music have largely remained unchanged. And there's only been like 4 main music discovery platforms in our lifetime. One is, MySpace, 2 is YouTube, 3 is SoundCloud, and 4 is now called TikTok. And I think each one of them has like served their purpose and, been net positive, I think, for the world. I think the main thing is that we need more tools to discover new music. I think one of the things that bothers me about music is that it's not an efficient form of talent discovery. I think some of the best musicians are not yet discovered. And how do we build things that actually, allow us to come through the sheer volume of music being uploaded per day? I think the last, the numbers came out, it's like 100,000 or whatever tracks per day uploaded to Spotify. And so we need more ways to connect with music, and not only just more ways to connect, but more active ways to connect. I think today music consumption is really, really passive, and people are falling more in love with songs and even videos than they are necessarily artists. And how do we build the best fan bases in the world are some of these most direct connections between an artist and a listener. And that's something that I think we've moved away from like the CD and iTunes era, where people were actively connecting with music because they were actively supporting the artist. And the next is obviously like, how do you help artists make more money on their music? How do you have more artists being full-time musicians? And I think the interesting thing there is like, today we're one problem that's kind of emerged is like there's one price for every single song, one price for every single stream. And that's actually always been the case with the music industry. But I think one of the things here is, coupled with the amount of music that's being uploaded, plus the types of music that are being uploaded, like sleep sounds, or, you've got all these like, I guess like sleep sounds is a good example, like just like short, really like repeat songs that get played on Spotify today. Stairway to Heaven is competing against those sleep sounds. And so they're all competing over this. Some songs are 30 seconds. And so it feels weird to put everything in this one size fits all business model. And how do you create more ways for people to directly value and support music, all in a pursuit of like, having artists live off their music. So I think those are some of the problems that we're obviously trying to solve. And I think, in terms of who's actually been solving those in the past, well, it's really this organization called a record label. And a record label has historically done 3 things. One is that they've obviously played a role in financing artists. I think that's the easiest to dismantle, mainly because money can come from anywhere. $10, who cares where it comes from, as long as obviously the artist is getting that money. And so I'll get into how creative capital plays a role here. 2 is like actually making the records, which is like a term called A&R, artist and repertoire, which is, I think the thing that tech will play the least role in terms of, there are some people that are fundamentally better at making records than others, and I think it's a unique value prop. And the 3 is like the marketing and distribution of the records. I think this is another thing that's vastly changing. It used to be that you have to sign to a label to get into a record store. They literally controlled who got in the record store. Today, the beauty of the internet is you can upload and put anything, anywhere. And I'm always been skeptical of viral gurus who say that they can help you go viral, because if they can really do that, then they should be the most influential person in the music industry. And so I think, honestly, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but I think nobody really has the advantage to go viral on the internet at this point. I think that it is the internet's domain. but at the same time, it's becoming harder and harder than ever just to stand out. So I think to focus on that first one, creative capital has always been the first thing that, Sound has gone after in terms of how do you help artists make more money on their music. If listeners are willing to back an artist and basically collect their music NFT, we can get into why they would do that. And artists can get creative capital at low to cheap or even no costs. Then that's a net win for them, because that means that they can fund their career, they can make more, living off their music. And I think, one of Sound's proudest metrics to date is that we've been able to pay out $5.3 million to artists in a year and a quarter, which again is something that I think further emphasizes just the need for more creative solutions for artists to make a full-time living off their music.
Over $5 million to artists. We should have led with that. I feel like we're burying the lead a little bit. That's huge.
Yeah, it's been something that, I think I always like to go after a little bit of delusional challenges. But, I just talked about the two problems, the ability to pay artists, the ability to basically help artists get discovered. Historically, those two things have actually been quite separate. Like if you look at the music discovery platforms, MySpace, YouTube, SoundCloud, TikTok, I've never been contacted by an artist saying I got, hordes of cash from YouTube, SoundCloud, TikTok, or MySpace. But they've been really helpful in like discovery and, where artists kind of break on the internet. And then if you look at the music monetization platforms, whether that's Bandcamp or iTunes or Spotify or CD stores, they have paid artists, but I've typically, again, not been contacted by artists saying my song is breaking on one of those platforms. And so I think part of Sound and part of the challenge that I wanted to experiment with is, can you help artists build their fan base at the same time as actually getting them paid? Not like as a byproduct, which is how like TikTok feels to me today. It's like you go viral on TikTok, but then you actually monetize somewhere else. Can you monetize and help them build their fans? Because most artists are looking for listeners. They don't have a captive. It's much easier, much different problem once you already have listeners that want to support you. But I think that's part of like the giant experiment that we're running over at Sound is, can we actually, monetize and help artists just, reach new listeners at the same time? Which again, we're super early in our journey, but I think something that we're really proud of is that $5.3 million.
So it feels like musicians want to get discovered. They want to find a way to monetize their work so that they can go full-time being an artist. And then listeners want to get access to discovering new music, new content, and new artists that they love. And now that we've got blockchain-based, Web3-based systems, there's an opportunity to disintermediate the role of the record company or the promoter and the people who have typically helped musicians cross the chasm from unknown into household name. That's not going to happen in a record store anymore or a CD store. That's going to happen via the internet. And maybe the old intermediaries were the record labels and the new intermediaries are YouTube and TikTok. What are the opportunities that Web3 offers in evolving how people discover music, how artists monetize music, and how they reach their fans? Like, what coordination mechanisms are you most excited about?
There's a couple that I think I'm most excited about, but two to call out in particular are, one is like the music industry today is not exactly known for fast, transparent, or accurate payouts. And I think part of like why building in public, why blockchains are interesting is this public ledger. And when things are public, it's easier to coordinate good actors. And I think today artists still don't get paid out in real time. It's not always clear where all the money is flowing, nor do they have insight. I think artists are first and foremost focused on, making music, not being accountants. And so one of the things that really interested me is, can we build this global payment system for paying music, making sure we don't lose funds, making sure the right people get paid, accurately, instantly. And that was something that I really wanted to see, was like, can we actually pay artists in real time without ever losing funds? Because in the music industry, there's a couple places where it's very common for funds to get lost, or if you don't claim your royalties, they disappear and get dispersed to other people. And so that was one thing that was deeply inspirational. And then two, it's always, I think, catches people off guard, which is how simple some of these things are. But still to this day, an artist has no access to their fans on any major streaming service. They have to go through that streaming service to message them or do anything with those fans. They don't have their email addresses, nothing. And so one of the things that really excited to me was like, an artist can build their audience on Sound and take it wherever they want, whether it's the wallet addresses, the emails, those should all be things that are publicly accessible to that artist. They should never, have to ask the platform to get access to that, because truthfully, it's their fans, it's their audience. I always say people don't collect sound things; they collect things from an NFT from a particular artist, and so it's their relationships. And so, today on Spotify, there is no ability to message all of your or take the email addresses from everyone who follows you and take them somewhere else, or sell them T-shirts. Everything has to go through the platform. And so to me, building, an open music graph where artists own their listeners and you can see what other listeners, are supporting is super, super interesting because I think it lets people build on top of that network. It creates more opportunities for public infrastructure. And that's something to me that I think is really, really exciting.
Yeah, it feels like the huge opportunity here is just to disintermediate the way that artists have a connection with their fans, and something just as basic as not sitting in the middle of that relationship and giving open access to the musician to their fans' contact information could be really powerful. And so I'm excited about protocols that can disintermediate that kind of work and can also, just regenerate the lives of artists. And the way that connects to regenerative crypto economics and the whole green pill theme to me is that art is such a way of regenerating our own spirits. And if we can regenerate the regenerators, there's going to be this fractal wave of hope and inspiration that will go outwards as artists can actually monetize their work and not be pinned down by a business model that doesn't support them. So it feels like a massive wave of creativity and hope and optimism that could be unleashed if we can figure that out, how to coordinate it.
Yeah, totally. And I think something today that's present, and I think one thing I always feel strongly about from a building perspective is the next innovation in the music industry is not necessarily gonna look like the last. And so to me, I think one of the things that I feel strongly about is like today the connection between an artist and a listener is very, very passive, and how do we make that as active as humanly possible? And so how do you create ways to directly support an artist? I always say, like, if I'm a huge fan of an artist today, let's say I'm a huge fan of Rio Cragen, who's an artist on Sound, and I'm listening to him on Spotify. There's no way for me to listen to him on Spotify and directly support him through his music. I can listen to it by streaming, but then even then, my subscription doesn't necessarily go to the people that I actually stream. And so creating a way to directly support an artist through their music is not presently there today on, most streaming providers. And again, something as simple as that is kind of the direct connection, I think, does get people feeling more passionate about supporting artists through their music. And it's something that's not present today. So I think, one of the things about Sound is like I've always wanted to build things that aren't present in the world, and rather than try and copy existing business models or existing products, because that's truthfully like where the exciting, greenfield is to me, is things that don't think exist today, the net new per se, not things that are already existing and that, we can already take advantage of.
Yeah. So, could we get into some of those coordination mechanisms and what you're really excited about? I'm excited about music NFTs just from following Cooper Turley and hearing about how you can make more off of a music NFT as an artist than you can off of 10,000 streams or something like that. What are the mechanisms that you're really excited about?
One of the things that's really, building on the point that I just mentioned is like there are some per stream rate, like 0.003 cents per stream today, and it's the one size fits all option for every single artist. And if I'm a huge fan of an artist, I only give them basically some amounts of dollars per year, no matter how big of a fan I am of that artist. And one of the reasons why is the only way to directly support an artist today through their music is to listen to it, and that takes time. And there is no let me just give them 100 streams worth of money just because I really, really want to support their music. And so I think, the music NFT kind of comes in as a way to directly support an artist through their music. And there's, a couple of things that I think are really interesting. One is like the ability to track who is there first. I do think that plays a role because regardless of how much money you have available to spend, something that puts everyone on the same playing field is who is there early. And it kind of makes this status symbol of basically showing like who was an artist's day one fans. And I think one of the things that's always bothered me is an artist, again, has no data on who was really there for them first. They get messages all the time saying, hey, I found you before anyone else, but there's no actual way to prove that. And I think at the core of this music experience is like we should reward people that were there to support an artist and their music, and we should make it fun to basically support, to find and check out and discover new songs. And then the next is this idea of like, who's this top backer who's really like putting their money where their mouth is. And there's ways that obviously you can keep track of who's collected the most from an artist, and so you're basically building this global network of music super fans and super collectors that directly want to support music and believe in the arts and believe in artists' stories and journeys. And I think one of the things is Spotify really owns the passive music consumption, and the casual music fan, I've wanted to lead into the opposite, like the hardcore music fans and the independent artists, because those are the ones that are the most underserved today in today's market. And so I think music NFTs serve as a coordination mechanism for building a giant network of hardcore music fans that really believe. And I think part of the interesting thing is music is inherently social. I think there's nothing that will get me to check out a song more than my friend saying, hey, I think you'll like this song, more than any algorithm or any recommendation system or an artist that I really trust. And so by nature, again, of everything being public and built in Web3, I think something that's really, really, really exciting is the ability for artists and listeners to basically see what everyone's collecting and be able to rabbit hole that way and dig into music and everything. And so something I'm also really excited about.
Is there an opportunity here, and this is just totally kind of a layman thought, but it feels like we've got the artists who want to reach the fans, and then we've got the fans who want to discover new art. And traditionally, I feel like record labels or technology platforms like YouTube or TikTok have sort of organized that. Is there a way to leverage the most active fans in order to create a signal aggregation mechanism where you can cross the chasm as an artist? I guess another way to putting it is like, instead of having an agent or someone who works on behalf of the artists, could you create like a decentralized coordination mechanism where those most active fans are the ones who are jumping on something, an artist first, and buying their NFTs, and that's a signal that, ooh, this project is really up and coming, and then that helps them cross the chasm. It feels like there's maybe an opportunity there, and maybe that's what you're saying, but I'm just putting my finger on it now.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's funny you say that, because I think that's something that I spent a lot of time thinking about is what is the correct minting format, and basically how do you incentivize reach? And obviously help an artist get paid at the same time. And they're kind of different things. If you want to maximize reach, you could argue you'd give it away for free, in the sense that, that's how you reach as many people as possible. And that's why if you look at YouTube or SoundCloud or TikTok, there have always been free platforms to use. But at the same time, we talked about the $5 million, and obviously we want to pay artists. And so how do you basically pay an artist while maximizing, reach at the same time? And those are some of the mechanics that we've been working on, is kind of how do you reach the most amount of people with their music, but still pay artists at the same time? And how do you build this breaking mechanism? Because I think one of the things that I believed is like, there's so much music being uploaded to the web, that's a fact. And the problem with humans is that we only have one set of ears. We can only listen to so many songs per day. And so I believe in wisdom of the crowds. How do you leverage the internet to find and, collectively help and break an artist? And that takes more than one person. I think one of the big things that I've always said with music in relation to other art forms is music is not just about making money. Like, if a song on Sound or a music NFT on Sound sells for $10 million tomorrow, it does not mean that song will be considered a big song. A big song means, that everyone knows the lyrics, everyone can sing the words. And so I think, part of this is how do you build something that can actually cause that reverberation across the culture? And that requires a sheer amount of audience and participation. And then I think the other thing to look at is look at some of the most successful fan bases in the world. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about the Grateful Dead or Taylor Swift, or even, people who did it themselves like Nipsey Hussle. A lot of the times it was not just the artist, because truthfully, the artist is focused on making music. Like they're artists. They became artists to make music and have a full-time career as an artist. A lot of times it's the listeners and the fans that are doing the marketing with the artist. And so to me, I'm less interested in like artists speaking down to their fans and like, having this like artist, at the top and the fans at the bottom just listening to information. I'm more interested in the spider web where you have the listeners talking to the other listeners and the fans talking to the fans. And the artist is obviously a critical and still the spokesperson of the community for sure. But it's really, how do you get these active fan bases that are, promoting the artist all over the internet? That to me is the more interesting opportunity today, because it's definitely, I think this is part of the pressure of an artist today. They have so much work to do. They have to make music. They have to promote it. They have to, they have to manage their community. They have to post exclusive content. They have to do all these things. And I think that's why when you look at the biggest fan bases, and one example is like, if you look at Fish as an example, and you go to a Fish show, a lot of the times you'll see homemade merch that is being sold by the fans and the community outside the shows, etc. And that to me is something that I think is another like a good example of a blueprint where how can you get your community contributing as much to the reverberation of that music across the internet without, while still giving the artist space to go create, which is ultimately, that's a thing that they're uniquely positioned to do. And so, yeah, 100%. And I think part of what Sound's been working on is how do we build minting mechanics that incentivize reach and payment at the same time. I think the earliest example of this was, many years ago, Radio had an album called In Rainbows, where, you could directly pay what you want for it. They gave away the album for free and you could pay what you want. Not saying that that's like the winning mint mechanic, but I was always inspired by things like that because I think at the very least, it was an experiment. And I think at the core of what's going on here, it's all experiments. And how do we incentivize people to spread the word about the music as much as possible, but still, at the end of the day, get an artist paid, because that's ultimately, one of the core problems is having the creative capital to be able to be an artist full time, and making more artists full-time careers so that, the goal is obviously, when you hear that somebody wants to be an artist, can you make that as reputable as being a lawyer, a doctor, or any other business profession out there, which doesn't always sometimes feel that way.
It feels like there's sort of a profound parallel to me in the example that you gave about in the Fish community, how they'll sort of homemade their own Fish merch and then they'll sell it. And I also am aware of these stories from the early Grateful Dead communities in which they would tape shows, and there was actually a market where you could send a copy to a show to someone over, I think it was a bulletin board or something that you could mail people tapes or something in. And these all, to me, feel like very early examples of headless brands where you allow a community to sort of co-own it with you. And instead of strictly enforcing the copyright, you let the community co-own the experience with you. And that energy reverberates out into the community and helps create a stronger community in music. And I'm wondering, what the lessons are for that in the networked age. And you really feel like you're on the frontier of that, David, which I think is really cool. And so, I'm wondering if you see any sort of parallels between those early networked music experiences pre-internet and the work that you're doing today with Web3 based coordination mechanisms.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to co-create alongside the artist, and or even at a collective level, like just getting listeners to create kind of like a marketing funnel for new music. A good example of this is we built a feature where if you share a link to a song or make a playlist, the playlist creator or the link share can earn 5% just by people collecting through that link or through that playlist, which was an early experiment in just being able to monetize curation, which historically has been something that's been like very undervalued. Like if you go on streaming services today, you won't find any user-generated playlists at the forefront. And I think, again, to me, one of the things about Sound that I'm trying to do differently is I'm less interested in Sound having the biggest playlist on Sound. I'm much more interested in having users have the best, most popular playlist on Sound. The complete opposite of how it works on dominant music platforms today. Because I think that is the opportunity. Is like, how do we have these individual people? Anyone can be a music tastemaker. You just have to build them the tools to basically be able to do so. And how do we kind of status signal that this person is really good at finding pop music early, and this person is really good at finding, Latin music early? And how do you create this network of music? Everyone has different tastes at the end of the day. And how do you basically funnel people to the right, how do we create as many avenues to discover new music as possible instead of concentrating in any one brand or one collective or one group's ability to discover new music? Because ultimately you're bottlenecked by how many songs can go on that playlist. And that's why I call them like traffic driving mechanisms, but you need as many places to traffic drive music. You don't want one place, because ultimately then it becomes something where only a select few can get heard or get discovered. And I think that's kind of the interesting experiment is, can we leverage like music listeners across the world to break and pay artists at the same time? So yeah, 100%.
Really excited about this. I've got Sound.xyz up on my browser, and there'll be a link in the show notes. If you're listening to this episode and you enjoy music, take Sound.xyz for a spin. Anything you want to say about the experience? If I'm listening to this episode, what's the first thing I should try on Sound.xyz?
Yeah, I mean, one is the first thing you should always do is listen to a song. I think, there's so much incredible music on Sound across different genres, across different locations in the world. I think people are always surprised to just hear the sheer level of talent that's already, on Sound. And that's why it's such a privilege to kind of build alongside these artists. Is a lot of them are future superstars, and already, we've seen so many artists kind of really start to expand even outside of Sound. So one is just listen to the music, because I think it speaks for itself. And then two is just try, collecting a music NFT, collect, a couple from different artists, and kind of join their, our respective communities, and just get the experience for directly supporting artists in their music, seeing your name show up in the audience section, seeing, the ability to leave a comment on the song. We just launched a mobile app. So, download the mobile app, and obviously there's something that just hits a little bit different about when you're listening to a song and you see your comment pop up on the song page. You can feel that support directly from that artist. And I think one of the things that really catches people off guard is how receptive artists are to basically connecting with people that directly support their music. And I think there's something that's it's such a personal experience for supporting an artist through their music that doesn't exist today. Today, you're so distracted. There's so many people in between an artist and a listener. And I think that's kind of the thing about Sound that I think is special is the social element, and you can see very easily and kind of start to rabbit hole like what other people that collected the same song like you are collecting, and you click their profile, find other songs. So it creates this endless behavior of just being able to collect art, and really support artists through their music. And yeah, I think that those are probably the two things: listen to the music and collect some music NFTs. And third would be make some playlists and start sharing them, because I think that's, pushing on the, and that's a kind of where I see a lot of Sound headed in the future, is kind of creating more curation tools for the listener base. Because that's ultimately, Sound started as a curated platform where, we were onboarding artists and, really building this tool alongside of them. But in the future, we're opening up soon. And I've been publicly talking about this, as we open up, there's going to be more and more music, the same problems that, faces everyone. And we need to build more ways to discover that music. And I think in order to do that, it's going to be the listeners and the curators and the playlist makers that are going to be responsible for how everyone, finds the song. So those are the three things to do.
Well, that's actually a segue into my next question. In a world in which you're maximally successful, what does that look like? So take me 5 or 10 years into the future. If Sound is maximally successful in helping artists get discovered and people collecting music NFTs, what does that world look like, and how has it changed the way art is produced and marketed and distributed?
Yeah, so I think my dream for starting Sound was like, if you are talented at making music and you want to do music full-time as a career, like you shouldn't have to know anyone in the music industry. You shouldn't have to relocate to Los Angeles. You should be able to be based anywhere in the world and be able to make money and have a career as being an artist. And so if Sound is, successful, I think you'll be able to just simply sit there and upload music to the internet, and all you'll need is obviously like a wallet. And basically, anyone around the world will be able to collect your music and directly support you on the journey of being an artist. And so we'll have more artists, making a full-time career on their music. And then, we'll be doing that without artists obviously having to give away their rights. There'll be more sources of creative capital for artists. And I think that to me is one of the things that I'm hoping to change. Is not necessarily saying like, let's remove labels per se, but let's create more funding opportunities for artists. Because the more sources of capital, the better. I think where, you get into trouble is if there's only one source of capital for artists, well, then they have all the leverage in the world and they can dictate whatever terms. And so I think the more net new sources of funding for artists, the more the terms are going to get better better and more fair across the board for artists, even if it's outside of, Web3 and sound. And so that's kind of, the maximal state for me is a utopia where, if you're talented, you don't need to know anyone and anything, and you can directly make a full-time career off your music.
Is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say?
No, I think you covered a lot of it. We went pretty deep. I think one of the things that I think to pay special attention to is what you talked about, which is how do you build coordination mechanisms for reach and making money. I think I'm not satisfied personally with either or. So I think there are things that I would do if I were just focused on trying to get an artist to blow up their song, but then I would be no better than any of the other music discovery platforms today. They don't necessarily pay artists. And there are things that I would do to get an artist paid. But then, if they're only catering to 50 people, then they're ultimately, like a lot of artists' goal is to have, thousands and hundreds of thousands or even millions of people to listen to their music. And so I think one of the things about obviously NFTs and crypto is the coordination side of being able to incentivize people to take, some positive force. And I think, to me, that is the challenge that I've been really thinking about is, how do you build different mechanics that incentivize those two things together? And I think, scarcity, which is how we got started at Sound, we started with like this 25 fixed edition. There'd only be 25. It's like a, limited edition. That was awesome because, it had scarcity, something that people can really understand, but then you're sacrificing the reach because only 25 people can collect it. You can have open editions, but then you have to get all these mints in that particular time period. And so we've been looking, we built something called Sound Swap, which was like an unlimited open edition where the price rises and, we swap the secondary market with the bonding curve. It was kind of this little wild experiment that's been, going really well. But I think we're always, and it's certainly not the last, we're always trying to push the envelope on how do we build scalable mechanics that allow, there's a lot of, details here, but that allow anyone to participate. And I believe part of what makes music so special is the ability for it's a universal language. Like it doesn't matter. It transcends socioeconomics, it transcends race, it transcends everything. And so to me, the beauty of music is the ability to bring us closer together. And so one of my rules for collecting and supporting artists is each, as much as possible, should not be price prohibitive in the sense that like everyone who wants to participate should be able to. It's part of the reason why I was inspired by like Radiohead, Pay What You Want. And at the same time, we obviously want to get artists paid so that they can have more of a career off their music. And so to me, I think today I'm not satisfied with the mechanics across the board for NFTs. And I think, hopefully Sound can pioneer a couple that I think are interesting formats if you're looking to solve the reach and monetization problem that we're looking to solve with music. So something that I'm really excited about is continue to launch mechanics that incentivize those two things.
Well, I'm wondering, at maturity, how much the mint mechanics and the way that we discover new artists on Sound and other platforms like it resemble the way that we fund our public goods in Web3. And, listeners know that I'm one of the founders of Gitcoin, and that I've since decentralized myself out of it and I'm disaffiliated from leadership. But basically, public goods have this problem where people want to fund public goods in general, but they don't know which public goods to fund. And so you have to create a signal generation mechanism where you can fund the right public goods, not just any public good. And I feel like there's a parallel there with music where it's like, well, people like music, but they don't like all of music. They have a certain amount of taste to them. And so how do you build a web of trust? How do you build a coordination mechanism? How do you build a mint mechanic that upregulates the projects, public goods, musicians that people actually care about? And I think that that's the interesting idea set in Web3 is that in Web2, we could sort of use likes as a mechanism to measure what people like, pun intended, but in a way, likes are kind of like the ultimate shitcoin because you have a million of them, you have a ton of them. And what if we could introduce something more scarce like a microtip or a microtransaction and use that to create a stronger signal of which things people care about? So, I guess maybe just thinking out loud here, but maybe there's some parallels between the coordination mechanisms that work in public goods funding and regen crypto and the ones we can use to fund artists. And so I'll be keeping an eye on which ones you're most excited about as things evolve.
Yeah, I think collecting really for me is the new like, and I think it is a like with like a serious amount of intent, largely because sometimes there's a lot of the times there's like a paid mechanic to it, And as I said, when people vote with their money, it's the strongest signal that you could possibly get that somebody really, really cares about this. And so to me, like the way, the past 15, 10 years on the internet, people have really talked about their followers or how many likes they got on, something. I think in the future, you're going to see the same set of fervor around like, who are my collectors? And, who believed in this first, who are the top collectors? And it's, the ability to kind of signal through collecting, I think, is where things are ultimately headed. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for, public music grant funding so that people can, because, we're talking about like the process of like the music is already made. Now we want to monetize it. A lot of times, like there's another problem that we're not even after today, which is like, I need the funds in the first place just to be able to create the music or create the world around us. And how can we create systems as well that maybe fund artists to maybe buy their first instrument or buy their first computer so they can make music in the first place and then monetize it obviously afterwards. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I think, one of the things I'm a student of music history. And I think one of the things that's always interested me is like, there's this country, Sweden, that like is dominant in like pop and like electronic music. And it's like, it's not a big country per se. It's like, 6 million people. And a lot of the, it's not an accident. And Spotify, obviously, and even SoundCloud is like Swedish roots. And, I should beg the question, why is this country so good at generating such like a large amount of music? And it's, one of the things that's interested me about the country is like the public music education system there is like so much more ingrained than it is necessarily in America. And it's like completely like I think like 30% of people go to public music education programs. And it's like not just something for like the talented and gifted. It's like anyone who wants to pick up music can pick up music. And I think to me, that's a, good example where if you put the effort to kind of create systems that reward artists and people who want to play with music, the downstream effects can be quite powerful. So, I think there's more coordination mechanisms than just the releasing of music. Even the creating the music is super interesting as well.
Yeah, that is super cool. Well, we'd love to have you back in a couple of years and see how Sound has grown and see what the decentralized network of artists and collectors looks like at that point. So thanks so much for joining the pod, David. Really excited to see how things evolve. And for the audience, check out Sound.xyz.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. And we'll be back soon.